Thanks for having me here. I'm happy to be part of this panel. So I guess my story started probably over 10 years ago now when I was at university. I was a really active athlete and academic. I was playing soccer for my university that I attended. And in the summers, I would spend up tree planting where we're exposed to lots of different insects and arachnids and all that sort of thing. So I started to notice around that time that there were some changes in my health that I started to kind of write off as just maybe getting older despite being, 2021, well before my time of aging, I think. And I didn't think very much of it until I started to do my master's out west at the University of Calgary and started to really feel some drastic health changes during that period. Most of them were neurological related. And at the time, Lyme disease wasn't on my radar at all. I hadn't really considered it as something that I would ever even encounter in my life. And as these issues started to become more and more severe, I became increasingly debilitated. And it spread from just neurological issues to really profound multi-system issues. Like Jim talked about, pretty much every system of my body was being affected. And, despite being less than 25, I was becoming almost completely debilitated. And so I managed to finish my master's with increasing severity of issues. And I spent a year after that just trying to work and kind of recover some of my health and stabilized a little bit. And then I was about to start a PhD at the Hotchkiss Brain Institute in neuroscience. And just before I had been set to start that, my health just kind of sort of completely dropped off in what felt like an instant. And I went from being somebody who was sort of coping with these issues to not being able to do anything at all. I couldn't walk, I couldn't read, I couldn't use a computer, I couldn't be in a room with more than one person at a time. I couldn't really do anything to take care of myself in any appreciable way. I couldn't work anymore. I had to drop out of the PhD program, and I had no idea what was going on. And like a lot of people that are probably listening to this, I was bounced around the medical system for years. It was probably at least 2 years before I got any sort of diagnosis. And in that time, I saw 20 to 30 doctors, a lot of different specialists. I would be prescribed drugs for one symptom, and then others would pop up and they would say, oh, it's the side effects of the drugs we prescribed you, so let's give you these drugs instead. Nothing was working, and I had just sort of accepted that that would be my life for the rest of my life. I'd completely given up, to be honest. And then one day I was actually at a clinic that was treating people with Lyme disease, and I was there because I thought I had neurological issues from a number of concussions or head injuries. And I was sitting amongst all these Lyme disease patients, and I sort of asked myself, some of this is looking familiar. Could this be what I'm experiencing? And so I spoke to the doctor and I said, I've been here for a while. I don't seem to be getting better. Could we look at Lyme disease? And we went down that path. And first I was tested through the Canadian testing, and it came back negative. And they said, well, let's try something else. And I did the international testing, and it came back positive. And that opened this can of worms that, maybe this was Lyme disease and co-infections. And from there, having that diagnosis started what became a quite long and difficult treatment path over the next probably 3 years, where I had to, like many people, find what worked for me and what didn't. And over that period of time, I slowly started to improve until I'd say late 2017, early 2018. I felt like I was in a good enough place to start trying to get back to some degree of life. And I thought, okay, I'm a scientist. I have the education and the background to become involved in this fight in a meaningful way. What can I do? And I had thought about maybe trying to get right back into academia, but I didn't feel quite ready for that. And so I thought maybe I could do something sort of on the industry front that might help. And through my journey, I'd become really well connected with a lot of physicians and researchers. And there was one sort of for me felt like a low-hanging fruit, which was there was no really accessible way to determine if you had been bit by a tick, whether that tick carried any of these pathogens that might make you really sick. And I thought that seems like a really obvious entry point. And, this technique involves PCR, something that I've done, thousands of times throughout my master's. So I'm sort of an expert in that. Maybe this is something I can jump into. I started putting the idea out there to various physicians, researchers, and there was a lot of support for it. And every time I came up against a roadblock that I thought, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this, through some sort of serendipity, it would just kind of crash down in front of me, and I'd say, okay, I guess I should do this. So in early 2018, I started Genetics, which is a private tick testing company. And since then, we've slowly grown from testing a couple hundred ticks a year to thousands of ticks every year, testing just for Lyme disease, for testing up to 18 different tick-borne pathogens, which we can find in ticks in Canada or at least North America. And we've grown quite significantly, and we feel like our reach has become a lot stronger, and we're really happy and proud of that because we feel that this is a really, really important service for Canadians. As a lot of people know, with Lyme disease, early diagnosis and early interventions can be absolutely critical for a good prognosis. And because of the type of testing that we have in humans, which is an antibody test and requires antibodies to be produced before it can really measure if you've been infected or not, there's a waiting period before that test can even be considered. And that's usually about 6 to 8 weeks. And in our opinion, that puts you outside of the ideal treatment window for Lyme disease. So this tick testing, we feel, gives a really good extra bit of information to people to determine if they've been exposed to tick-borne diseases, not just Lyme disease, other diseases as well, which are becoming increasingly important and prevalent in Canada, and helps make early decisions with the assistance of, usually a trained healthcare practitioner to decide if exposure has occurred and then what the best route of action is after that. And I think the other thing that I would say about that is, because we're receiving thousands of ticks from all across Canada, it actually puts us in a really unique position to sort of perform surveillance on the spread of ticks and tick-borne diseases in Canada. So every year at the end of the tick seasons, which is generally from spring once the snow melts until usually December, when the snowpack starts to really stabilize on the ground and the temperature is consistently below freezing, we go back through all the ticks we've received, and we look through where they came from. We have GPS coordinates usually for where they've come from. We look at what species they were, what types of pathogens they were carrying, and then we can form a bunch of statistics which we publish on our website. And we can also take those coordinates and we can put them on a map so that people can look at this map of Canada and see where different tick species are, which types of pathogens are there, what the different percentage or infection prevalences are in ticks in different areas in different provinces. And we hope it provides a really useful tool to people to kind of judge what their exposure might be in different areas, and just see how over time, how the distribution of these ticks and their associated pathogens are changing. And that project has been funded for the last couple of years by CanLyme. So I'd like to say a big thank you to CanLyme as well for helping us publish that research, which we think is really important for Canadians.